The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance has been having series of meetings with large tech companies. Last week, they met players like Make My Trip, Oyo, Swiggy, Zomato, and they're expected to very soon meet the big tech, including Facebook, Google, etc. So what exactly is the agenda of these meetings? What are the kind of issues that will be discussed? To get more on this, I'm joined now exclusively by the chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance, Mr. Jayant Sinha. Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for speaking with us at the Times Network. Let me begin by just getting a sense of what are the major issues being discussed at this series of meetings, because we're hearing in some part about complaints that some companies have against Indian aggregator companies, and then complaints that Indian tech companies have against the global big tech giants. So what are the primary issues your committee is looking at?
Tamanna ji, competitive behavior in digital markets around the world demonstrates 4 or 5 issues that need to be addressed in the competition law. These issues include, number one, winner-take-all markets where you end up with monopolistic outcomes where there are one, maybe 2 players that become preeminent. So how do you deal with these winner-take-all effects? Do you have ex-ante regulation to prevent these kinds of monopolistic outcomes? This is one issue that around the world has become a very important issue. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is the issues associated with complementary products. So if you end up becoming a very, very key player, an important preeminent player in one market, how do you then compete in other markets through bundling and tying? Does that give you an unfair competitive advantage? That also has to be examined and understood as to how bundling and tying works. So that is a second matter that needs to be considered. A third issue is, of course, the use of data. If you have very privileged data that you have a knowledge of from one market, do you use that in another market and therefore again gain a competitive advantage? And so, you end up with a non-level playing field in these adjacent markets. That's a third issue in competition law that everybody's considering, is the use of data, what data can be used, not be used, etc. And then finally, pricing. Which is that if you have, a significant market power, are you forcing pricing, discounts, fees, commissions onto people that are part of your platforms that would be considered non-competitive or anti-competitive behavior? So these are 4 prominent issues that have come up in competition law related to digital markets, largely because digital markets are fundamentally different from traditional markets, and the underlying economics of digital markets, which are driven by increasing returns to size as opposed to diminishing returns to size, and of course the role of network effects is quite different from those of traditional markets like cement or fertilizer or financial services and so on, where you don't have these fast reducing marginal costs and therefore increasing returns to size.
Let me come specifically to the first round of meetings you had around the 22nd of July, where you had Make My Trip, Zomato, Swiggy, Oyo, etc. So now what we read in reports was that their vendors were upset with some of their monopolistic practices. Could you give us some insights on what was discussed in that meeting?
There are many meetings that we've already had, Tamanna, and as I said, we are extensively consulting with all stakeholders. And so stakeholders associated with digital markets, digital platforms include consumers, they include partners and vendors that are associated with digital platforms. So restaurants, hotels, travel agents, news publishers, consumers, consumer associations. These are all people that are part of the ecosystem of digital markets. Then, of course, in digital markets, we have Indian players as well as global players. And of course, then we have the ministry, which is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, as well as the Competition Commission of India. So these are all members, stakeholders associated with these digital market ecosystems. And we are in consultations with all of them. We're hearing everyone's perspectives to understand what the issues are with digital markets. And as I said earlier, to understand how competition law should evolve to address some of these competitive behaviors, some of these competitive practices.
Yes, but could you give us details of the kinds of complaints coming in? Because this is kind of a long-standing issue which has been there in the public domain, where companies, for example, talk about restaurants. If I take that one particular area, where restaurants say aggregators are squeezing their margins, they have an upper hand. Is this the kind of complaint that you've been looking into?
So there's a range of issues, Tamanna, that need to be investigated. These issues start with the nature of digital markets themselves. And I'll just take a step back and explain to you why competition law for digital markets has to be fundamentally different from competition law for traditional markets. So digital markets have three very important characteristics that lead to a very new approach to them. Number one, digital markets result very often in winner-take-all types of outcomes. So you will have one major player that completely dominates a particular digital market. So whether it's search, whether it's ride-hailing, whether it's food delivery, you'll see that it's one or two players that end up becoming, the most prominent players in those markets. So winner-take-all effects. Number two, as is well known, again in competition law, what happens is that there's very significant bundling and tying associated with one digital platform, then bundling something else, additional products with that digital platform. And so you get into other markets as well with a very big advantage. So contestability of markets becomes a big issue. And then there's a third set of issues associated with digital markets, which is the accumulation of data, which then can also result in a situation where there is not a level playing field in that particular market as well. So these are three or four of the issues that are very, very common. And once you accumulate this kind of preeminence in a market, you end up in a situation where there will be all kinds of disputes and conflicts associated with pricing, around the use of data, around the use of complementary products, etc. These are the kinds of things that we're hearing as far as India is concerned. And by the way, this is exactly what is being seen and observed around the world also. So if you were to study, what is happening in terms of the EU and their thinking on digital markets, if you were to look at the US and see how the US is considering the behavior, competitive behavior and conduct of digital platforms, or Australia for that matter, everywhere you will see similar issues that I have said, which is that we have these very unique digital markets, very different from traditional markets. They require a variety of new approaches, ex-ante, implementations. They require you to look at bundling and tying. They require you to look at winner-take-all effects. They require you to look at platform neutrality. All of these are consistent themes, consistent issues that are happening around the world. And therefore, countries and jurisdictions around the world are modifying and extending their competition law to deal with this. And we think that the situation is similar in India as well, which is why we are holding these stakeholder consultations.
So in terms of evolving competition law, is that not a bit of a slippery slope, Mr. Sinha? Because the fears are that we're going to have policy meddling in a space which is growing very rapidly and which is very dynamic. And you also spoke about international precedent, some of the countries that are tackling these issues. Is there any model that you see globally which you find ideal?
India is a very unique market. We are one of the most important digital ecosystems in the world. We have, 4, 5, 600 million internet users. We have a very fast growing market. We have a very vibrant startup ecosystem where we have domestic players that are very, very successful. We have a set of digital public goods, digital public infrastructure like the India Stack that we have created. And at the same time, we have the global players. So we have an ecosystem, a digital ecosystem in India that is thoroughly unique and that you can't compare with any other country in the world. And that's why we have to come up with our own unique solutions. Of course, we can learn from others, which is what we are trying to do. But we have to develop our own unique way of looking at all of this. Now, with respect to your question of how do we balance innovation as well as fairness and contestability? That's the art of policymaking, and that's why it's so important to be able to speak to all stakeholders so that we understand how, in fact, this balance can be struck. But let's be very clear. markets flourish and consumers do well when we have contestable competitive markets that offer a level playing field to all players. So those are attributes, those are objectives that I think we can all agree on. And then the question becomes, how do we ensure that we have competition law that results in contestability, fairness, and a level playing field?
Now, I must ask you, since the Standing Committee on Finance has got members of all parties working together on very important issues, this is a time that I know you're seeing the complete opposite of that in Parliament, in the Lok Sabha, in the Rajya Sabha. There's a complete communication breakdown. Why is that, and what can be done?
It's very unfortunate, Tamanna. I mean, Parliament is meant for debate, discussion, and decision. And when you reduce Parliament to just a shouting chamber where you're constantly blocking important issues from being discussed, important bills from being passed, it's extremely unfortunate. And that's really the situation that we have right now. Thankfully, in our committees, we are able to do serious work. We still our colleagues that work on important issues. And so in our standing committee, I think we have been able to do some very, very serious and important work. Our reports have been very well received. They have been all passed by consensus. And we have been able to develop, I think, meaningful and influential recommendations on many topics, whether it's the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, whether it's MSME credit flows, whether it is the work that we've done on the startup ecosystem. In all of these areas, I think our reports have been very well received. And because we genuinely put our reports together with the country's interests in mind and with the view that let's provide positive inputs to government's policy making.
That's exactly the point, sir. Why can't this be extended to Parliament as well? And I want to address the charge here again that the opposition is talking about, that the Treasury benches should be getting the session going, but is avoiding a debate on inflation.
Tamanna, the Honorable Finance Minister is not well just now. She has COVID and she's recovering from COVID. So I think we cannot have a meaningful discussion on any economic issues unless the Honorable Finance Minister is in the House. So I'm not sure that I accept what the opposition is saying about a discussion on inflation or any other important economic issues. So let's wait for the Finance Minister to get well and for her to be in the House. And then I'm sure we will have a very excellent and meaningful discussion. We've never ever shied away or not had these important discussions. There have been in every session very serious and important debates on economic issues. And we have been able to put our point forward with a great deal of credibility and conviction. And I'm sure we will do the same when the Honorable Finance Minister is well enough again. So I'm not sure I buy the opposition's views in this matter. There are lots of other important topics. We just passed a bill on the Antarctic, which I spoke on last week, which was extremely important as well, because it deals with climate change. It deals with our standing in the global community. And therefore, we can get other very, very important business done as well.
All right, we hope to see an outcome on this very soon. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, for speaking with us.